Chapter 1071. Nara Group Castle. Hugo made a grand gesture as they stepped through the portal. Welcome to the Nara Group Castle. It doesn't belong to any of the guilds. It's cooperatively owned by the Alliance itself, with hired staff to maintain it. In front of Carl was an enormous stone building, 6 stories tall, and large enough that it rather resembled a warehouse with a stone wall around the parking lot. Call it ostentatious, but with 10 mythic ranked members, over 60 totems, and 200 overlords, among our combined 1,000 members, we have plenty of big egos to cater to, and this location is closer to the dungeon that the group controls than any of our individual guild houses. Now that you're members, we will arrange a section of the building for the Darklight host members to use when they are in the area. The layout is somewhat unique, as you will see once you get inside. The Lake Nara region is a haven for the desperate and the overconfident, as there are also dozens of minor dungeons in the area, mostly monarch ranked and higher. There is a magical map on the wall showing which ones are active and which are on timers, as guild alliance groups trigger the cooldown on many of the dungeons, the same as guild members clearing the instance do. The big mage stopped to catch his breath, and a group of dragonkin servants came running out to greet them. These are some of our apprentices, guildless hopeful adventurers who work at the Alliance House for job experience and the chance to get taken on as a porter, which comes with loot rights to dungeons. Hugo explained. The dragonkin warrior, a teenaged boy at the commander rank, nodded enthusiastically. The dungeon doesn't put a minimum rank on entrance, so we can do the looting, collect materials, and carry items for adventuring teams who don't have inventory space. The boy explained. No inventory space? Carl asked in confusion. Hugo shrugged. Some classes get strange inventory options. Some get a chest, some only get a few dozen spots to place items, and if they carry a lot of random junk, they're always out of space. Do you have a lot? Dana snickered quietly at the thought of all the loot that had to be hiding in the beast spaces, but Carl just nodded. The system considers me a sort of support class, so other than my bonded items, I have a number of chests, each one larger than the one I got the rank before. Not that he used them much. In fact, they were 90% empty, with only 2 even being used regularly. For items to be upgraded and finished items, naturally. Dave wrapped an arm around Carl and Dana's shoulders, as they were standing together, and led them forward. Just wait until you get settled in. It's going to be great having actual crafters in the Alliance. Tell me, Miss Dana, how are you at dealing with pathetic pleading and tears? He asked.
Dana laughed.
Surely, with so many dungeons, things aren't that dire. Dave smirked back at her and ran a hand through his curly brown hair. Sure, if you're a monarch or overlord and willing to risk your life for the 1 in 10 chance that someone in your team will get a decent item from a dungeon run. I know that this might come as a shock to you all, but most people have no intention of going into the dungeon in poor quality trash drops in order to get the gear they need to get into a better group. Dana winked at the druid. That's what we have Carl for. The monster man can solo a 5-person dungeon on his own rank, so we're relegated to the role of moral support and security for the healers. Dave thought about her comment for a second, then realized the imbalance. He's got the beasts with him, and they all count as him, so it's only 1 person to the dungeon. Oh, that is pure evil. Queen Remy should be able to summon bodyguards, right? Most queens can. He asked.
Carl nodded.
It's a very useful skill. We should get you a spot for the monthly totem run. It's a 40-person group dungeon, so there's always room for more without things getting crowded. It's also well suited to the Darklight host, as it supplies a lot of the resources that we sell to keep things running here. The trick is that it only opens once a month, and it can only be done by members of the same guild or guild alliance.
Carl nodded.
So, there can't really be weak guilds outside an alliance because they'll miss out on the biggest opportunities. I am assuming that the mythic rank dungeon is much more exclusive, but the totem ranked ones should be something that most groups can do with some effort. Dave nodded. Most of the larger totem dungeons are guild locked. The 5-person runs are all open, and the vast majority of adventurers do arranged or pickup groups. But honestly, the loot is awful. For the most part, a dungeon drops equipment a full rank below its difficulty, and only the bosses have a chance to give items of rare or epic quality. So, doing Overlord ranked dungeons mostly drops common and uncommon grade Monarch ranked gear, which, compared to the cost of living here, is worthless. Dana looked confused. How can the cost of living be high here? I mean, if you've got totem ranked dungeons, actually living here should be the smallest of concerns. The Mythic Guild leaders all laughed at her naive view of how things worked in Sholaha. Tax is by the head, and by the square meter of land owned. And the Immortal Monarch doesn't want us hoarding wealth and taking over, so they set it for Mythic Warriors, and then discount it by rank. So, a menial job here actually pays an insane rate, but 3/4 of it goes to the tax collector. Or you work for a guild, or guild alliance, who pays your head tax as part of your employment. Hugo added. The Dragonkin apprentice nodded. With meals, rooms and taxes included in our pay package, we can focus entirely on our growth with the money we make, and just send a cut to the guild. I swear, the alchemists have a racket going. Every rank, the supplements and buff potions get exponentially more expensive. Remy looked up in her space. That was excellent news. Chapter 1072, Fortress Village. Hugo led the group into the massive hulk of a fortress, which turned out to actually be an outer shell containing many warehouses for bulk supplies, as it wasn't a proper guild branch for any of the residents. The interior was set up like a neighborhood with streets, apartment blocks, and even a few villas with courtyards. There are actually 8 major residences with courtyards here, but you will be our 6th alliance member, so after you move in, 2 will be empty. Members who live in the city full-time, as well as the apprentices, live in the villas or the blocks. It's a bit strange having our own miniature city inside the fortress, but we inherited the building from a guild that went bankrupt after making a number of bad wagers on the tournaments. So, the design wasn't our choice, but it works well enough for our purposes, and it is secure. You can restrict a portal location to only be used by your guild members. There is one in the house I'm leading you to, and it was fully reset after we took over, so nobody else has access. Ah, here we are. Hugo stopped in front of a modern-looking villa with a flower garden, and Carl nodded in approval. It's not large outside, but there are 5 sleeping rooms on the 2nd floor, common areas on the main, and a basement crafting lab along with the apprentice dorms, which are usually placed on the 2nd or 3rd basement level if you choose to hire some.
Dana frowned.
Are they expecting everyone to hire dwarves? Who puts bedrooms on the 2nd basement level? The myths chuckled at her question. It's a security measure. Battles between totems and myths tend to have collateral damage, so if the fortress is raided, the lower-level members can retreat to the safe rooms in the sub-basement and wait it out. That didn't used to be the case, but guild raids would lead to hundreds of deaths, and that was just bad for everyone involved. Deve explained. Lotus repeatedly poked Carl in the back until he turned around so he could see her pleading, pouty eyes expression. Tion does it better, Carl reminded her, but Lotus silently kept it up. Yes, we will try to find some cute apprentices to hang out with you, but you can't keep them from their work. Lotus gave a fist pump, and the guild leaders shook their heads in dismay. I am beginning to understand the group composition a bit better now. Raj, the darkest-skinned of the warriors among the guild leaders, chuckled. Ophelia nodded in agreement. Lotus is secretly the center of our group. You see, Tessa is her childhood friend. I was the only female berserker in my class, and Dana was the strongest female mage when we formed our group to travel. And how does Carl fit in that metric? Raj asked. Carl has all the beasts, and you know how green dragon clerics are. But also, he's so incredibly overpowered that it would just be ridiculous to not want to go with him. Ophelia replied with a shrug, as if it should be obvious. Carl pulled a sleepy Tion from his space and handed him to Lotus, who immediately cradled and began to pet the little fox. The guild leader stared at the pair. Is that a baby stone-fur divine fox? Deve asked after a few seconds of silence. Indeed, the newest addition to our little family, and the newest reason that Lotus has to remain nearby. Though she usually stays at the back in larger battles, as she has a tree of life transformation, and her area healing skills are outstanding.
Carl explained.
We will help you all get into dungeon teams if you're planning to remain here for a while. Hugo insisted. Carl checked with the others, and they all appeared to be on board with the plan. But Ophelia had other ideas as well. Remy had proven that her potions didn't always risk death, so there was a chance that they could all be pushed to the Overlord rank. They had advanced their classes already, so if they could join Overlord rank dungeon teams, they could gain both experience and resources. Though, if they were all at Overlord, they could just go together. There were 5 of them, and the golems could serve the role of tanks. Or Ophelia could, as her new class was actually specialized in the role. Their presence was starting to draw curious onlookers, as it wasn't often that all 5 of the Alliance leaders gathered anywhere unless it was for work. But today, they were in front of a vacant house, and everyone had gotten the notice about the Darklight host joining the Alliance. What none of them had realized was that this was the same Darklight host that Supreme Lady Matilda led. If they had known, they would have been much more cautious about approaching. I believe that we will head in and check the place out, then I see that we will have many requests for custom goods. Or possibly goods in general. I haven't checked how our store inventory is doing.
Karl joked.
Hugo laughed. Well, there are 1,000 members in total, plus the newer apprentices who we didn't have a guild slot for. So, I would say that your guild store is likely out of stock. Karl checked the store inventory while Hugo led everyone inside. They had some items available, mostly the simple things that they mass-produced for merchants. The utility rings for daily tasks and water creation. Then a few of the commander rank warrior rings with bonus skill damage on them, and the damage reduction bracelets. Everything else had sold out. Even Ashbringer had his section of the shop tagged with a Forge Day, refilling stock label. The Alliance members bought everything he had. What Karl and the guild had forgotten was that transport wasn't cheap if you couldn't open your own portals, and the Dragon Isles were seriously lacking in craftsmen in general. So, with such high demand in the Lake Nara region, prices here were normally 3 to 5 times higher than anywhere else. But the Darklight host had just put everything up at retail to see who complained and demanded a discount. Only nobody did.
Chapter 1073, Alliance Villa.
The interior of the house was beautiful, but largely unfurnished, with only a few pieces left behind by the last occupants. I may have forgotten that there was nothing in here but pieces the last guild didn't want. Hugo admitted as they walked into the main hall, with double curved stairways at the far end, which led to the second floor. I see 3 floors, but I don't recall you mentioning the 3rd floor. Ophelia noted as she looked up at the vaulted ceiling. The mage looked confused as he counted balconies. You're right. I don't know what is up there. I thought that these were all the same. The 1st floor in my guild's manor is much higher than this one. The cleaning staff complain incessantly about the ceiling height. He agreed. Not for much longer, Karl suspected. They had bought out all the functional rings that they could get their hands on, and while some were certainly for resale here, the staff should have some for themselves. Ophelia crouched, then jumped to the 3rd floor balcony. The berserker landed smoothly on the ledge, then stepped over the stone banister and looked back down with a shrug. It's just one big open room up here. I don't know what they were intending to use it for, but I suspect that it might be for hosting parties or something. There is what looks like a wooden portable bar station sitting under a drop cloth. That wasn't as cool as what everyone else had been hoping for, but it might come in useful in the future, as the main stairwell ran all the way up to the 3rd floor, and they could block off the private areas of the house which were in between. But that would also allow them to move smoothly between the 2 areas of a party, or disappear into their rooms, should they wish to leave the party, or need a touch-up. Karl looked around the space with satisfaction. This will do wonderfully. Let me know what the Darklight host needs to contribute to the Alliance Fund for the upkeep, and I will transfer it to you. I know a few furniture makers in Drod, but there are likely some local ones as well. Dave smiled and nodded eagerly. There is one just down the street. I can go talk to her for you if you'd like. I think that she's sweet on me. Sure. Bring your lovely lady friend here, and we will see about decorating the place. And in the meantime, we can talk to the Alliance members who have gathered outside the door, waiting for the bosses to leave so that they can plead for custom items to be made. Karl agreed. Raj burst into laughter, clapping his hand on his leg as he roared in mirth. Oh, they'll have plenty of those. You know how it is when you start getting powerful. Suddenly, money stops mattering because what you need and what you want are simply not available for any price. So, many of them have been gathering treasures for decades, hoping that one day they'll manage to find those last few pieces that they need to make their setup absolutely perfect. But what all are you going to offer them? No offense, but I have no idea what your actual crafting skill can do, he explained.
Karl shrugged.
I can put skills that I know on crafted items, create items with specific skills or random ones, or even directly teach beasts and beastkin skills. Dave was almost out the door when Karl said that last part. Wait, back up. You can directly teach skills that aren't part of a skill tree.
Karl nodded.
You have to be compatible, and I have to know the skill, and there has to be some sort of beast blood involved. That last part was an outright lie Karl's group knew. He was just playing favorites to limit the number of people who asked, but keeping the knowledge open so that he could sell the skill. Wait here, I need to go get someone before the furniture maker. Actually, I will have Jedina go deal with the furniture maker. They get along well. Tessa smirked as the druid ran out the door. He's coming back with a ranger, isn't he? Hugo nodded. Yeah, the one from his raiding team. But he's completely forgotten that his mother is an owl beastkin, and that he should qualify as well. 30 seconds later, Dave ran back in carrying a small man in his arms like a princess. I brought the ranger. Lotus patted him gently on his shoulder. You can put him down now, and we should likely explain things to him because he looks really confused. Right? Sorry, got excited. This is the rune master and he can teach skills. Tell him the thing. Dave insisted, but the mythic ranked ranger didn't look any less confused.
Karl nodded politely.
My name is Karl, a beast master champion by class, and a rune master by trade. It sounds like Dave thinks you might need a skill that I have. The petite ranger laughed, but nodded in agreement. I have been after a specific skill for many years. You see, I have unlocked a system quest for an advanced class, but I need an elemental control type ability. That's not part of my skill tree, and I have never heard of a skill book for one, or a way to learn it from study. It's not a thing that rangers can learn, normally. We're not shamans, but the system says there is some way that I can do it and become a ranger stormlord. Karl shrugged, and pressed his finger to the man's head while muttering in ancient Dwarven, for that air of mysticism, as the system didn't translate that particular language. Hee poke. In their spaces, Kara and Tion rolled on the ground, laughing at the childish joke. But the ranger's eyes opened wide in shock. Champion Karl offers knowledge, skill, minor water control, will be transferred to the puddle splasher Arthas. Then his eyes went vacant, and the mythic ranked ranger froze. Is that normal? Dave whispered. He's in the class selection scenario. I've seen this more than once before.
Karl explained.
When he finally started moving again, Arthas held out his hands, then make a bow drawing motion. A bow made entirely of water formed, with a shining metal arrow. Beautiful. Now I can finally use some of these skill points. I've been out of new skills since late royal rank. He sighed. As he was mythic now, there was little doubt that he would soon possess every single skill that his new class could offer, especially for someone who was part of an active dungeon farming team. Everyone on Karl's team had noticed by now that system-linked incidents granted more skill points than everyday life events. Crafting, dungeons, monster spawns, all were great sources of skill points, to the point that Karl's team members were rarely as lacking in points as Karl himself was. Not many classes wanted 50 points for a single skill after all. The cleric skills were mostly under 5 points each. Chapter 1074. Welcoming Gifts. Then Karl turned to Dave. How about we gift you something to help you in the dungeon as well? Dave shrugged, unsure that Karl could offer him anything that would benefit him at this point. Beast Master Champion Karl offers knowledge, skill, limited invulnerability. Will be transferred to the heroic tree lover. Dave. Skill already known. Beast Master Champion Karl offers knowledge, skill, crushing blows. Will be transferred to the heroic tree lover. Dave. Skill already known. Beast Master Champion Karl offers knowledge, skill, bestial regeneration. Will be transferred to the heroic tree lover. Dave. Skill transferred. Deve's eyes went as wide as Arthas had. Then he pulled Carl into a bear hug and spun him in circles. The healers are going to love this. A self-healing bear tank will be even greater than the Blood Knights and their life leech skills. He shouted. Ophelia nodded in agreement, and Carl remembered that he had been slacking on his group benefits. Beast Master Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, brutal pugilist. Will be transferred to the cuddle bear Ophelia. Ophelia smiled gently at Carl in thanks, not wanting others to notice that he had granted her something as well, then frowned as she actually read the message. Since when was Cuddle Bear her most notable title to the system? It was definitely messing with her. Speaking of self-healing bear tanks, Ophelia here is an excellent one. She's also got a similar skill set, plus she can damage transfer from the group to herself. It's limited, but with strong healing abilities and damage reduction. I think that she will be quite the hit with the Alliance once we have time to get everyone pushed to Overlord. Carl offered. How long will that take? Hugo asked curiously. Depending on the resources, less than a week. But making Overlord-ranked epic potions requires some really rare materials.
Carl explained.
Even Remy didn't have many of them in her space, and she had been planting them in the tiny world to try to grow more. She did have enough of the new style potions ready for her girls, though. She had begun to work on them as soon as the first one had worked, so they would be ready when the group finally had a few moments to themselves to make an advancement in peace. Advancements using special techniques were definitely a private thing, at least when it came to her own people. But it looked like they were going to be busy for some time, as Carl and the crafters back home filled all the orders that the Guild Alliance needed to recover from the resource drought that they had been in. So, when the big bosses left, she would take them into the tiny world and get them all advanced while Carl and Sister Ray worked. So, how are we doing this? By rank descending, Deve asked, now that the excitement of helping his teammate had worn off.
Carl shrugged.
That works for me. I can take pre-orders from the myths first, then from the totems. I will get all those filled, while the apprentices at our Drod Guild House fill the common orders. They've been going hard trying to restock and prepare for the influx, but there are only a few of them and countless orders, especially for the decorative items, which take hours each to carve. The guild leaders chuckled. Of course, that was going to be the great limitation. Having a powerful item was nice, but having a cool-looking, powerful item was much more important to most. Fortunately, the Darklight host understood the issue, and they were planning to work with them. Why don't you do robes first? I've got so much totem-ranked clothing here, and the selection is excellent. Ray suggested. By excellent selection, she meant that she had silk shirts for men in black. Then 3 different styles of mage robes which could be good for anyone, and countless dresses for ladies in multiple colors. All that they needed was Carl's final touch to add a few more abilities to them before they were activated for the first time. Why don't we start with the mages instead? At Totem and Mythic, naturally. I have a decent selection of mage robes, dresses, and a few shirts available in totem-ranked spider silk. I can upgrade them with runes and gems much more quickly than most items. Carl offered. Oh, that would be good. Can you make one that we can show to the mages when they arrive, so they know if it's better than what they have? Deve asked. I don't see why not. Just be patient with me. It takes a bit to write everything up without ruining the appearance of the item. Deve's outfit included a powder blue tabard, and there was a matching set of generic mage robes among Ray's options, which were gender-neutral as far as Carl knew. Surely his group had a mage in it. Though if it was a guy, they might not be as impressed by the color as Deve was likely to be that Carl could match his tabard. Carl didn't miss the strange looks when he took out the robes, then immediately turned them inside out and took out a paint pen. It's the fastest way to dye fabric, and I'm utter trash at embroidery. There are some decorations on the outside of the outfit, but I'll put the runes on the inside, so they're only visible when the robes are filled with mana.
Carl explained.
None of what Carl did next made sense to the guild leaders, but Carl looked satisfied after he wrote 1 line of runes down each arm and then 5 vertically down the back. Item created totem rank, epic grade. Robes of the Inexhaustible Well, adds 250 points to spell power, 10% bonus to casting speed, 5% bonus to total spell damage. Additional effects: self-repair level 2, mana storage level 7. Carl nodded in satisfaction, while the others inspected the robes. How much mana is storage level 7? Dave asked. Carl wasn't sure how to answer that. He didn't have a direct number for his mana pool. About as much as the average overlord can hold on their own. Give or take a few percent. He offered. You're saying that simply wearing those robes would double an overlord-ranked mage's mana pool? Dave asked. If he wasn't wearing any other gear, yes. The spell power and spell damage should combine very well. I considered making it self-recharge and reduce casting cost, but that would push the boundaries of epic grade without adding magical stones, which would massively increase the cost.
Carl, explain it.
Let's get the mages in here. I suspect that everyone is going to want new robes. Did you say that you have other styles as well? Carl smiled at the druid. For the ladies, yes. You see, the clothing is made by my friend the Blood Destruction Spider, and she loves ladies' fashion. The gentlemen can get by with robes. The guild leaders chuckled. Dealing with eccentric master craftsmen was an everyday occurrence when you were in the higher ranks. If that meant putting their mages into strange but powerful outfits, they wouldn't care. Even if it made them look like a fashion show runway. Besides, half the totems and myths were bats hit crazy to begin with. Chapter 1075. Ray's Branding. The first of the mages showed up a few minutes later, and Ray smirked at Carl as she passed over a bright red layered dress with golden embroidery all over, in an ancient style which would make the mage look like an imperial concubine from the Golden Dragon Nation's historical dramas. It also had a large totem rank fire element gem woven into it over the heart, so Carl prepared to duplicate the former robe, then add the Hellfire Vortex spell to the robes. That should be a spell that not many, if any, mages knew. Welcome, welcome. Please, inspect the first set of robes while I work on another. Carl informed her, then nudged Tion to make him a large stone work table. They needed somewhere to show off Ray's designs before Carl upgraded them. But this mage was getting what she was given. Ray insisted. Unfortunately for their plans to work in peace, making a whole new set of robes was far too distracting, and the new arrival simply watched him work in silence for 20 minutes as more mages slowly filtered in and began to inspect the robes on display with hushed voices. They're finished. Lady Ray insists these ones are only for sale to you in particular. Carl explained as he turned the robes right side out to show off the embroidery. Item created totem rank, totem grade. Flaming Robes of the Inexhaustible Well adds 250 points to spell power, 10% bonus to casting speed, 5% bonus to total spell damage. Additional effects: self-repair level 2, mana storage level 7, Hellstorm Vortex. The other mages were practically drooling as they gazed upon the stats of the robes, especially after Dave explained just how much mana they could hold. But Carl was more interested in that totem grade label. That was a new one, and he hadn't known there was a quality ranking between epic and artifact. Or perhaps there wasn't until you got to totem rank. How much? The dark-haired mage asked simply. She was a mythic rank battle mage, she was not short on funds. Lady Ray requests magical stones or other raw resources of equivalent value. Carl informed her. The mage nodded, and began taking out bars of metal, an assortment of rocks that exuded immense magic, and a few magical gems. Ray nodded in satisfaction. There was a totem-ranked shadow stone in there. That was good. Carl shook her hand, then held up the robes for her to equip them and replace the simple shirt and pants she was wearing. Oh, you need to get her a hair thingy. Let me out and I'll do her makeup. Remy insisted. Opal giggled and passed Carl a simple commander rank illusion stone she had enchanted with a disguise. She could make simple disguises with a thought, and illusion stones naturally held them. If they weren't so rare, she would do this more often. It was a great trick for her interactive performance plans. Carl handed the mage the tiny stone, and she simply frowned in confusion, wondering why the merchant was giving her change. Activate the stone. It goes with the robes.
Carl, explain it.
She shrugged, and Dave whistled, while Raj made a low grunt of rather carnal-sounding appreciation. Her face turned pale with bright red lips and immaculate makeup. while her hair was pulled into an elaborate updo, with a golden tiara and jade hair pins. The mage took out a mirror and smiled. "Your Lady Ray has exquisite taste. I like it." Kara dug through her pile of loot and found a large oval illusion stone. Then, in a stroke of brilliance, cut it into wafer-thin slices with disintegration. "Sister Opal, take these, you can use them to make illusion tokens," she explained. "That would work wonderfully. Not for strong illusions, as it wasn't a complete stone. But for doing hair and makeup it was just right." One of the other female mages giggled. "Oh, is this a fashion contest? We all get to play dress up in new battle gear."
Karl shrugged.
"It is now. Don't worry, gentlemen. I've got both popular types of traditional mage robes. The flowing ones and the ones preferred by the spellblades and martial artists for mobility." The only other mythic ranked mage was the woman who had just spoken, and Ray insisted that she needed either an idol-style frilly short dress or Dana-style combat robes. So, Carl held up both to let her choose before he got to work. "Really?" she asked. "I can do traditional robes as well, but this is what the lady offers for alternates." She sighed. "So, Nyx gets to be an imperial concubine and I'm a magical girl? Because I'm definitely not dressing as her bodyguard." Carl held up simple black mage robes with shimmering threads that looked like stars in a night sky. "You can be the imperial magician if you'd like." After careful consideration, she pointed at the pop idol dress. "Ha, I knew it. She just didn't want to admit it in public." Ray cheered. Carl considered what to do with this one. It didn't have a gem in it, but the last item had come out with a whole new quality ranking that Carl hadn't seen before. But it did have totem rank bone slices in the corset to hold the shape, and those could be upgraded separately. Carl was about to start when the memory of his old maul flashed in his mind. That was a brilliant addition to an armor piece. He took the bones out and began carving the runes for the multiple casting effect on them. Probably wouldn't be as good as the maul had been, but it should let the mage cast more than one spell at a time. If it worked, he would make another like it for Dana. Item created: totem rank, totem grade. Idol dress of the inexhaustible magician adds 250 points to spell power, 10% bonus to casting speed, 5% bonus to total spell damage. Additional effects: self-repair level 2, mana storage level 7, spell storage. Spell storage allows up to 5 spells to be precast and held in reserve to be instantly released from the item at will. Not quite the same as the maul, but in a way both better and more versatile. The maul could only stack identical copies of an attack spell as you used them. The dress could hold 5 random spells. Carl handed the completed work over, and the mage changed. Then Ray passed Carl matching thigh highs and shoes for the outfit. "Here, add these. They're totem-ranked silk, and they should bond." She laughed as she changed, then did a twirl and made a pose with a golden scepter in her hand. At the door, a disgruntled noise stopped the laughter. A mythic-ranked warrior stood at the door. "I should have known it. The insanity of the Darklight host is contagious. What the hell are you wearing?" The mage rolled her eyes. "Oh, relax. We're just having a bit of fun. They made me new combat gear. And look at this." She pulsed with power, and 5 layers of arcane energy barrier formed over her instantly. Dave hummed to himself. "Maybe I need that dress." Raj snorted. "But with a longer skirt. Nobody wants to see your balls in combat." Carl smiled at the warrior to defuse the tension. "Why don't we try to find gear for you next? I think that I know just the right one." Chapter 1076. Return of Fashion. The warrior stood at the door for a moment, then slowly came forward with a disgusted look at the mage, who lifted one foot and waved her scepter at him in a cutesy pose, then stuck her tongue out at him as he passed. Maybe the Darklight host was contagious. Ashbringer had just finished a suit of armor out of totem-ranked metals, and while it was currently at the Overlord rank, that would quickly change as Carl got to work. It was traditional plate and chain, but altered for greater than usual flexibility, as Ashbringer had made it for someone who used a two-handed blade or axe. The guild leaders had said that they were the main tanks for their groups, so this new arrival should be a damage-type warrior. The armor was also a very dignified ash black, with a fiery red underglow from the demonic magic that Ashbringer had used to create it. It had incredible fire resistance and nearly perfect damage reduction. So, Karl focused his rune work on adding damage, agility, and strength, along with the sharpness skill. As he finished, the totem-ranked runes surged and the armor began to emit a black demonic mist, casting shadows around the pieces on the table. Item created totem rank, totem grade. Molten armor of 1,000 cuts adds 250 points to skill power, 10% bonus to skill activation speed, 5% bonus to total skill damage. Additional effects: self-repair level 3, mana storage level 5, sharpness. Sharpness, slashing, stabbing, and disintegration type abilities increase in damage by 10% per rank. The warrior stared at the armor with pure greed and began to reach for it when Karl stepped forward and smiled. I believe that you will find that the price is quite reasonable. 3 weights of the armor in totem ranked or higher raw materials. He insisted. The warrior simply stared past him at the armor, clearly pondering his chances of getting past Karl to simply take the item. But his guild leader was right there, and the rational part of his brain said that it would be a terrible idea to start trouble with their new alliance members, who were willing to make high-quality items for their main raid team. And this was far better than what he already used, which was mythic rank but only rare grade. Slowly, he began piling items on the table, then took out a scale and weighed them. Karl resisted the urge to laugh at the expression on Raj's face as the grumpy warrior paid for his purchase. Nobody seemed put out by it, and while part of that would be because of his power, most of it should be that they were just used to him being a grump all the time. Once he was satisfied that he had paid down to the last gram, he equipped the armor, and was instantly surrounded by a thin layer of black fog with a deep crimson glow from under the black plates of his armor. Now, that looks properly intimidating. I wonder if we can mass-produce it so that we can have a whole raid team of cool-looking warriors. One of the totems joked. How about just go away? The warrior grumbled as he stomped away. Karl gave the guild leaders a curious look, and Hugo made a gesture that Karl took as, I will explain later, and not in public. A totem-ranked battle mage smirked after the grumpy warrior left, and wrapped his arm around the myth in an idle dress. At least the mages can all look cool. I think he said that he had battle mage combat robes. There are enough of us to send a full team out dressed the same. Or we can convince the ladies to get coordinated outfits, so they look like an idle troupe. He joked. Dave cleared his throat. First things first. I want to order some stuff. Then I need to run off and take care of guild business. He handed Karl a paper which simply said, like they got, but cooler looking, in wobbly script. Got it. I will work on that after we pass out the mage outfits, as they're already made, and I will need custom items made for you.
Karl, explain it.
Works for me. Let me know when it's done. Totem Team 1, if any of you are in here, move to the front. You are scheduled to be at the dungeon in 2 hours. A surprising number of people moved forward, and Dave chuckled. Team 1 is a 40-person dungeon team, so they've got a dozen mage and mage-adjacent classes on the team. One of the mages nodded. 2/3 of the totems in the Alliance are members of Team 1, but the dungeon that we do is only once every other week, so we're also on other teams. Team 1 is also the team for the monthly dungeon. Hugo added.
Karl nodded.
Well, in that case I should make friends, as I might attempt to work my way into a spot for that monthly dungeon. The mages seemed confused by his comment. I thought that you were a crafter? One asked. This is just my trade skill. Spending all day inside writing esoteric runes on various pieces of gear and statues would drive me insane. I'm actually quite adept in combat.
Karl, explain it.
The guild leaders laughed quietly. That was one way of putting it. Change your outfit and show them, Hugo insisted. Karl activated his armor, showing the mages his tabard, with the decorative 3rd golden ring to denote an above-rank guild challenge victory at the totem rank. Seriously? The mythic mage asked, placing her hands on her hips and taking a calculated pose, playing to her current idle outfit. That's how we all met, and I ended up as the 6th guild leader in the Alliance, despite not being at the mythic rank. Karl agreed. So that's how it happened. I thought that they had just found a crafting guild when they went to the auction. You need to tell us the story sometime. A floating butterfly appeared beside Carl, representing Opal, who despised having to go outside in person. An evening showing of the recount of the mythic duel will begin at dark tonight, here in this manor. Well, it looks like we're hosting a watch party tonight. I will talk to someone about getting the house set up for guests. Carl shook his head. Opal and Tion are already on it. Chapter 1077. Let the man work. Hugo laughed at the expressions of the mages in the alliance. That would have been his thought as well, had he not seen it in action. A totem defeating a myth was simply something that didn't happen. Shouldn't happen. It would disrupt the entire power balance of the Dragon Isles if totems could routinely defeat myths, or if overlords could defeat totems. The damage reduction was too powerful of a buff. But it was undeniable that the system recognized it, as a few of the mages had pulled up his list of titles, and found that there were indeed 3 guild champion titles with over-rank victory notes. And the latest wasn't even 2 days ago. Hugo's expression turned contemplative as he finished laughing. You know, it would be a good exercise for them to get to spar with you. It's not often that we're challenged by other alliances, but it's incredibly rare that anyone trains in advance to fight against other system users. He suggested, like self-defense training? That's not a terrible idea. Guild challenges might be infrequent, but they'll be even more infrequent when the others know that your guild is prepared. A challenge is their peak against your peak, or representatives at a designated rank. But what if the challenge is refused? That happened to us in Drod. But the attacking guild wasn't prepared when we launched an artillery strike on their guild house. Carl explained, and the mages all paled. That was absolutely horrific. Forget the rank differences. The guild houses normally housed entire families, servants, and other non-combatants. The mere thought that someone would bombard one when the challenge was refused was enough to terrify many of them. Others recognized that it was the attacking guild who had been bombarded, and while it was still horrific, they had brought it upon themselves. Then there was the third group. What do you mean, bombarded? Isn't the Darklight host a tiny guild? I only see 4 members at totem rank or higher when I search the guild listings. One of the mages asked. One of my bonded partners is a Ghostfire Thunderbird. Carl began, while the mage nodded eagerly. Ghostfire is brutal, and he should have the ability to create a rain of fire, right? The mage asked. As well as a meteor storm and flaming vortexes. Carl agreed. The mage whistled. That's just brutal. Most of us struggle against flying targets, as they can just retreat to a safer distance, and the spell travel time lets them dodge unless we focus on tracking them.
Carl smiled.
There are a few spells with no travel time, but yes. Generally, it's hard to hit a target thousands of meters away unless it can't move. Hawk tends to take it personally if someone actually manages to hit him. The mage chuckled. You named a Ghostfire Thunderbird Hawk? I like your style, monster man. Dana almost choked, trying not to laugh. Tell him, she insisted. He evolved from a windspeed hawk.
Carl elaborated.
Now, most of the mages were laughing, while Dave shrugged in acceptance. How very appropriate. Bird is bird. And Carl is Carl, and Dana Mage is Dana Mage. Hawk agreed in his space. To prove his point, Dave summoned a small group of hawks at the common rank. It was a popular skill with druids for scouting, but druids could also learn the skill, speak with animals. So Dave was likely the one that understood what went on in Carl's head the best. The birds flew around for a few seconds before Dave dismissed them, and then he sighed. All right, we should let the man work if we intend to get our outfits done in any sort of reasonable time frame. Pick your outfit and meet back here at 9 for the evening showing of the duel. I don't know what they're planning, but that was a glasswing butterfly, and if she says she can put on a show, she can do it. Dave insisted. Carl nodded in agreement. We will set up the upper floors, but there's only room for 100 or so to sit comfortably. Dave and Hugo turned together to look up at the top floor. There should be room for twice that, unless Carl was making comfortable chairs for everyone and leaving space for servants to deliver refreshments. But if he said 100, that was what they would bring. Tell the others we have space for all the totems and myths for the show. We will throw a larger welcome party later, and you all can tell your friends the story tomorrow. It's been a big day for the Darklight host, and we should let them rest. Hugo informed his alliance members. Carl set out outfits of each style, and the mages came forward with color requests, then said their goodbyes to the ladies, leaving them alone with Carl as the myths shook hands and headed back to their work. Now, time for me to get to work. Ray, you can make outfits for the rogues next if you want. Ashbringer will take care of the warriors as he gets time. Metal armor takes more effort to craft, and you know how the warriors are. They'll mostly want that heavy defense. Ray came out in humanoid form and shrugged. Don't worry about that. I have a system worked out for the warriors. Tion can make metal plates at totem rank with his earth control skills. So we can make them brigandine armor sets if they don't want leather or cloth. Not as flashy as the shiny full plate of the knights, but certainly a valid option for heavy armor. The issue was that Tion had no crafting skills, so it would be entirely up to Carl and Ray to finish the armor pieces that he made the metal plates for, in order for the item to be considered completed by the system. If they had a blacksmithing skill book, they could likely train him, or they could have him train under Ashbringer. But there simply hadn't been time for any of that yet. Not to mention that Tion was small enough to fit in Ashbringer's palm. It was still too early to be starting him as a traditional apprentice, even if he had a humanoid form. Like Kara, he had shown no interest in changing shapes. Chapter 1078 Theater Setup. Tion was currently upstairs with Opal's illusions, making theater seating and a stage. Tion made the chair frames, Opal made the cushions. It could have all been illusionary, but they had decided that it was better if the chairs themselves were real, so that they could be more easily rearranged later. Opal would be concentrating on the show, so if she made the room as one large illusion, then it would cause extra work and mana drain on her when people changed the furniture positions. But if she just linked independent illusions to the chairs, it didn't matter if people messed with them. At worst, someone might break the spell on their own chair. Ray used Shadow Step to go join them and offered up piles of cushions instead of using illusions. She had made thousands of them, testing theories, and she could spin up 100 chair cushions in minutes. That left Opal free to focus on the stage that Tion had set up, while the Fox and Spider arranged chairs on large platforms so that each row was slightly higher than the one in front, like a proper theater. They couldn't have any bad seats for the show after all. Tion did make the whole structure slide back together so it could be placed against the wall. Then he didn't have to make it twice, and they could just store the chairs in someone's space until they were ready to use them again. Or put them in a row in front, but that didn't look as good. Carl worked as fast as he could to make the mages matching robes, all to the same totem rank, epic grade standard as the demo set. It would be strange to have so many people in armor with the exact same stats, but there really wasn't anything else that the mages needed, other than even better armor with a spell effect attached. That would take much longer, and Carl would charge a fortune for it. So nobody had pushed the matter. Besides, they didn't want to annoy their bosses by paying to buy up armor as good as what the new guild had made for the mythic rank mages. A few could afford to, but they had heard that the Runemaster also made excellent weapons and accessories, so they could just come back and place a custom order with him later. That would let them have just what they needed for their own specialties. Word spread fast through the Alliance about the actual state of the Darklight host. There weren't many of them, but they weren't to be trifled with. Their guild leader had some sort of crazy support class and the Runemaster trade skill. The fact that he could simply add a skill that he knew as a usable skill on a piece of equipment was enough to nearly make the Alliance members vomit blood in envy. Over half of them were still stuck with the basic warrior class, and skill book drops rarely happened in any of the dungeons they had access to. Plus, the librarians only had a handful of useful skills for them, and they all had them unless they were very young. There were rumors that one of the mythic dungeons dropped skill books, but if it was true, nobody was putting them up for sale or giving them to the blue dragons to be duplicated. Of course, it was possible that the items bonded to the person who got them and simply couldn't be given away. Carl had finished with the mage outfits and was started on the first few of the leather armor sets that Ray had provided for the rogues when the Alliance members began to return for the show. Are the preparations ready? Opal's butler just led the first guests inside. Carl asked with a guild message. All good. There are food and drinks as well as illusionary servers. The show is ready, the chairs are ready, and everyone is set to welcome them and meet new people. Except Kara. Kara is napping. Tian replied, "That could be either good or bad. Either she wasn't interested in meeting all these strangers at the same time, or she felt that she needed some extra energy for whatever she had planned for later." With the chaos badger sleeping, it was impossible to tell by her thoughts. "Welcome, welcome. Mages, please come get your robes and dresses. I have them all prepared. If there are any rogue-type classes or agility fighters who prefer light leather armor, I have a few samples on hand for you to look at. Warriors, we will have some armor samples for you tomorrow afternoon," Carl declared as more guests began to pour in the large wooden double doors. "How does this count as protection?" one of the rogues asked, looking at a piece that was little more than a leather bra with transparent silk and a few straps to hold weapons and gear between it and the tight-fitting pants. "It's totem-ranked spider silk, no easier to cut through than the leather. Not great against bludgeoning attacks, but the suit has excellent damage reduction."
Karl explained.
One of the warriors chuckled as he looked at the armor. "I've seen this style before. It's incredibly popular with the obsession demons. They're twice as agile as the average dragonkin or beastkin, and this style lets them keep all their weapons handy without slowing them down. It doesn't matter how bad your armor is against clubs when nobody can hit you." Ray came to join them and nodded happily. If someone is beating the rogues with a club, the warriors have already failed at their task. It's more important that the damage dealers are unrestricted in their killing than it is for them to waste potential bonus points on defense. I already compromised on the design by having the runes for damage reduction added, instead of a bonus to edged weapon damage, which could have been an extra 15% of base damage, on top of the other damage bonuses. She explained. "You are the leatherworker?" the warrior asked, only slightly disturbed by the aura of this strange humanoid monster. Ray nodded. "I am also the one who spun the silk. All of these are my precious masterpieces." That brought the mages over to thank her for her hard work. Everyone had changed into their new outfits to show off their purchases to their teammates. With Ray's fashion sense, that didn't make the event seem any less flashy, especially once the mages started storing mana in their new robes, which made the runes and sparkling threads shine in the dim light until the mages figured out how to hide the effect. Chapter 1079. Friends and Allies. The rogues joined Carl and Ray, looking at the options which went from simple and outdoorsy, more suited to rangers, through cloth outfits with leather-reinforced vital points, which were great for martial artists or battle mages like Dana. Then there was the selection of sexy leather, which Ray had deliberately made better than any of the other options so that more people would buy it. Carl knew better than to argue with her, and he had even prepared a few sets with additional skills on them, in case someone from the mythic teams wanted to upgrade right now. The thing was, he didn't know if there was a female rogue on the mythic team. Unfortunately for Ray's big dreams, there were not. There were rogues, but all small, nimble men. Not all suited to her fashionable outfits. But they knew people who were and who would be willing to pay full retail. Carl had been setting the prices randomly, so while the Alliance was supposed to get a discount, he didn't actually have a base price. He would just have to charge more to non-Alliance members. Dave nodded as he entered. "You don't mind if we call a few other guild leaders over, do you? It's good for the Alliance to maintain relations, and they can bring the members who will want Lady Ray's fashion."
Karl nodded.
"All right, one of these sets has sharpness and shatter on it for pure damage output. The other has perfect camouflage and lifesteal, with maximum bonus poison damage, so the wearer will passively keep healing if a stealth strike goes wrong. I thought about giving it invisibility or a night haunter, but the number of rogues who could actually use those skills is limited, and there would be no point in having them wear armor with them on it." Dave sent out a few messages, presumably to send a runner to escort the other guild leaders to their fortress, and then took a moment to admire the outfits. "Do you have a skill that could completely hide someone's true appearance? We have a few intelligence officers who can fake their name in the system display, but a simple disguise spell can only change so much," he asked.
Karl nodded.
"I can make a trinket with humanoid transformation or beast form. Either should turn them into an entirely different looking person." "How different are we talking? Is it detectable?" Dave asked. What is my true form? Carl asked. The druid blinked and stared at him. Isn't this your true form? Surely it's not the dragon form. That was an avatar-type holy magic spell. Carl smiled and shook his head. This is the beast form spell. I'm more comfortable this way. Dave smiled. That is magnificent. Even if it does make them furry, there are enough beastkin with heavy beast blood that nobody would question it. However, I don't know if humanoid transformation will work for them, as they're all dragonkin and already humanoids.
Karl shrugged.
I haven't tried on humanoids. I think it does, though. If my memory serves, the larger troll species and giants used it to fit into smaller spaces. Dana walked over and ran her claws gently up Carl's back under his shirt in greeting. He smiled and leaned down to kiss her forehead. There are some problems with the transformation spell, though. Sometimes, they make you too adorable.
Karl joked.
Dana rolled her eyes at him, but the Alliance members all nodded in understanding. Fox Charm was a subtle but powerful skill, and only Dave could tell that the attraction was partly from the passive skill and not just the adorable fox girl. I take it that you are not a beastkin, then? Dave asked. Dana shook her head. Human, actually. Pure human. I just fit in better in this form. One of the totem-ranked female rogues gave her a thumbs up. I approve. Dana smiled at her, then realized that the girl had pointed dragon ears with tufts of fur at the end. She had never seen a dragon with fur before, but she had read about the winter dragons, a form of ice element drake that lived in the mountains. So, this woman likely shared the blood of the dragons that the winter dragons had descended from.
Uman smei funyanyo.
One of the men agreed. The dragonkin rogue with the tufted ears snorted in amusement. You say that as if you don't smell like an unwashed ogre half the time. This is the first time you've smelled like soap in months. I bathe when I get dirty. The man grumbled, then dropped the topic. We can make charms to entirely hide scent as well. I just don't put it on the armor, as so many stealth sorts already have a solution or skill for it. Carl offered. It was a simple effect, and it was already included on many of the cleaning rings that the apprentices made. Only it was normally used on the room you were cleaning, not yourself. Their store sells all sorts of useful things for that purpose. I see that they also have scented soaps. One of the rogues noted. Carl quickly checked the guild store. Indeed, they did have scented soaps and they were medicinal. Each of the bars had a slightly different scent, but the most popular one seemed to be the floral-scented one that granted an 8-hour self-cleaning effect that would make most dirt and debris fall off the skin without sticking. There was clean and then there was magically clean. It was a potion, but the apprentices thought that it would be better if they weakened it into a bar of soap so you got the effect with every washing. They sell a case a day to the locals in Drod now.
Remi informed Karl proudly.
Her apprentices were learning to make the best of mistakes and turn them into new products. Not many alchemists had that level of innovation. Chapter 1080. It's a Ray Day. A tinkling chime from upstairs informed everyone that the play was ready, and the guests started to filter up the stairs. Only a few stragglers were left, but Carl waited downstairs for the final guests, who were coming from their own guild houses nearby. While he waited, Carl made a few trinkets with beast form on it. Those ones seemed much easier to make than most spells, perhaps a side effect of his class, or possibly the favor of the beast gods, as he was visually turning people into beastkin. The spell was also remarkably simple to write, compared to most other illusion and transformation-type spells. So, when 6 new mythic rank visitors entered together, he had the spells ready, and the armor still waiting on the table for the rogues. There were 3 rogues, but only 2 women, who would hopefully be suitable for Ray's fashion. The male beastkin rogue was more interested in Carl, staring at him as if he would see through the disguise if he just looked hard enough. It's a physical transformation, not an illusion. If you have nullify or dispel, you could probably force me back to my natural form. But you can't see through beast form, Carl offered. The man smiled and adjusted his hat as small round ears shifted it out of position. How much for the token? Even if I'm not impressed with the armor, I want one, he asked. Carl laughed and tossed him the amulet. On the house. The beast gods want you to have it. Technically, it was Carl who thought it would be entertaining, but that was the same thing, really. The rogue caught the token and transformed, turning fully furred with a badger's head. But not all black with white on the back like Kara. It was more brown with white and black stripes. Oh, grizzly badger. Good choice.
Karl realized.
The rogue laughed as he moved to inspect the armor. Then his hands, then his companions. I shrunk. The world looks different from down here. He realized. His guild master, a mythic-ranked paladin named Alfred, patted him on the shoulder. Well, there are no more concerns about you being able to sneak through small spaces, or about him looking down into our cleavage constantly. He's not tall enough anymore, one of the female rogues joked. The badger rolled his eyes and turned his attention to the demonstration set of armor, then to the female sets. What is with this bias? There are multiple skills on those, but none on this, he asked.
Karl chuckled.
Lady Ray prefers women's fashion. But that set was the demo model for the totems. We can make you a set equal to the female sets. It will just take a few days. The rogue who had been teasing him about perving on her picked up one of the others, a bodysuit with many pockets. I don't see a restriction on it, so technically you could wear this one. It would just be a bit sexier than you're used to. Carl noticed that she wasn't putting it down, though. It was the set with sharpness and shatter on it and stats for maximum damage output. I love it. How painful is this going to be for my pocketbook? She asked, already sounding pained at the thought. As guests of the Alliance, I will cut you a discount, the same as the other myths got. 3 weights of the item in totem-ranked raw materials, or mythic items and materials of equivalent value. Carl offered. Dave nodded. That was what he had charged the others, though only the warrior who had been rude about the idol dress had to pay the 3 weights price. The mythic rogue took out handfuls of treasure with an extremely reluctant look on her face that reminded Carl of Kara. It seemed that the reluctance to part with treasures was not exclusively a badger species trait. Carl also noted that the badger thought he was being smart as he picked up the totem-ranked demonstration armor and took out totem-ranked metals and leathers, which were the heaviest of resources that he could pick, reducing the cost of his loss. But he had not realized that as a crafting guild, the Darklight host was just going to turn that into more gear and sell that new gear for the same price. Their warehouse floor was going to suffer. Speaking of which, there was a warehouse attached to the manor and marked for their use. So, they could load it up with all the loot they got here once Carl figured out how to link it as a guild warehouse so that others could actually get the materials back out. While the badger rogue was counting out his materials, the bodysuit had been equipped, and his guild mate was checking herself out in the mirror, admiring how it hugged her curves just right and gave that extra bit of lift to carefully control sag and bounce when she moved. Lady Ray is a genius. She really does know what it takes to show off. She giggled. Ray nodded happily. It is important to make a dramatic entrance when you face an enemy. If not, how will everyone else remember that you can kill them? That made the myths all laugh. Even for a blood destruction demonic spider, Lady Ray was particularly bloodthirsty even when she was in a good mood. The third rogue came to inspect the armor set out for her and smiled. Did you make the armor for us? Or choose us to visit because you had the armor? The second one. Carl agreed. The advanced class that I got specializes in poison-based damage over time effects. So, perfect disguise and life steal with maximum bonus poison damage is practically my dream wishlist. This armor alone will nearly double my damage output, and the amount of healing that I will gain might make our cleric cry tears of joy. Her guild master laughed. That's because you keep getting hit when you push for an extra stack of damage. If you just back off one step earlier, he wouldn't hate you so much. The 2 ladies stared at each other for a second, then sighed and began stacking mythic resources on the counter. That should be the value equivalent of 3 times the weight in totem resources. The poison specialist declared.
Karl nodded in Satisfaktion.
It was close enough, and he didn't know the local prices. In Drad, it was far more than equal. Carl clapped his hands once in satisfaction. Wonderful. Now, would you like to join us for a show? Our guild's Glasswing Butterfly is putting on a retelling of a guild challenge duel tonight for the ranking members of the Alliance and their guests. Chapter 1081, Reenactment. The guild leaders pulled Dana and Carl to their seats at the back, while Ray spun a hammock to hang from the corner of the ceiling, her preferred angle to watch from. The other beasts preferred to watch from inside their spaces, as they could get a better view there than from any spot in the room. An announcer in the form of the King of Nulnulgat appeared on the stage, which transformed into a view of the arena, where the seating area of the manor was just a small portion of the stadium, as Opal activated illusionary domain to make it possible to have a life-sized show. Welcome everyone to the recreation of the Guild Challenge duel between the mythic warrior Jerome and the totem-ranked beast master champion Carl. The illusion spoke, and 10,000 illusionary voices cheered from the crowd. The two champions took their places and began to taunt each other, which made the alliance members chuckle at the audacity. He didn't, did he? One of the warriors asked when the illusionary Carl declared that he would take the mythic dungeon as compensation if he won. The guild leaders laughed, confirming that it had actually happened. Everyone present had a general idea how this would end, as Carl and his guild were now members of their alliance. But the confident trash talk leading up to the duel had been enhanced slightly by Opal's retelling, as had the size of Carl's avatar form. From here, it looked even more majestic than the guild masters remembered it. But the way that the overflowing power, the sound of claws on steel and steel on scales was deafening, and the scent of blood and ash filled the impromptu auditorium as the duel continued, drawing the crowd from tense to excited, and then to roaring with laughter as the Haint and Carl taunted the mythic warrior. Carl's paw slashed at the warrior, and the sound of warping steel and breaking bones filled the room as Jerome bounced off the barrier surrounding the arena, then took another dose of ghost fire to the face. Carl tried not to laugh as Opal had him posing grandly as he recalled the bodyguards and golems to beat Jerome down for the final time, and the crowd gasped as he activated his final buff skill to increase his strength and speed. For a few moments, it actually looked like Carl was going to lose, and everything was splattered with dragon blood, which Opal had made to dramatically drip down the barrier, though in reality it didn't stick at all and simply fell to the ground. So well done was the reenactment that by the time that Jerome dramatically collapsed to the ground as heroic intervention ended, it almost felt anticlimactic. The King of Nulnulgat rushing over to save Jerome's life as his soul was visibly leaking toward the Haint was the final high point of the battle, before the scene changed to Carl alone in the arena. The assembled alliance members cheered and clapped as the avatar form of Carl spread its wings and made a slight bow in their direction, though Carl did notice that it was looking directly at him. Excellent work, Opal. I dare say that they've never seen a show this impressive before. Are these shows a regular thing for your guild? The mythic mage in the idol dress asked as the chaos after the show died down. Yeah, we have movie nights a few times a week. Either recreations of historical events, stories from storybooks, or an original series that Opal is working on. Carl agreed. A few of the guests got up and were going to walk down the stands, either looking for an exit or exploring the area. I wouldn't go too far. If Opal ends the illusion, you'll land in the living room on the first floor. Carl informed them. The warriors laughed, but continued off into the stands. I'm more interested in this illusionary space. This is absolutely brilliant. It has to be a domain-level spell, right? An illusion strong enough that it can warp space, he asked.
Carl nodded.
That's right. It's her species' racial specialty. The warrior sighed. I had hoped that it was a skill your mage was using. If that was the case, there might be a chance to learn it. I could use a training arena like this.
Carl nodded.
It's not the best for that, as damage will break the illusion, but layered with a few other spells, it would theoretically be possible. If you do happen to research the possibility, I would be glad to help you test it, though you could likely do that yourself. Anyone who can toss a mythic-ranked warrior around like a rag doll certainly doesn't lack the power to test their own defensive artifacts. Dave chuckled. The real fight was insane. They actually had to constantly reinforce the mythic rank barrier over the arena because neither of the fighters cared where their miss skills landed. If we hadn't gathered so many powerful spectators, they likely would have broken the arena protections. What sort of skill even lets a totem take hits like that? Watching it felt like two mythic warriors going at it. A warrior in the crowd asked. Everyone turned to Carl, as none of them had the answer to that question. I've got an advanced version of limited invulnerability, plenty of damage reduction, and then another 20% off all damage taken thanks to a class skill. So, I'm only taking around half as much as normal and I ignore a large base amount of damage. Enough that against most enemies, I don't even take damage until they go all out. Carl offered. And with skills like that, you chose to make weapons for a living? The warrior asked, confused. Oh, that's really just a hobby to keep the guild's funding afloat. I do a little bit of whatever keeps life interesting. The group from the Darklight host who are here now were all out hunting excess monsters from the spawns to please the Black Dragon god and keep their population under control. The warrior shook his head in dismay. That's nuts. If I could make this much money in an afternoon, I would never leave the house again.
Karl chuckled.
You might never get the chance if you could. You see, it's very difficult to stop once you get started with advanced crafting. So few crafters advance in rank due to making the same thing all the time that higher ranking equipment is in demand all over the world. So, if you don't run off to do something far away, you end up in a workshop all day every day for the rest of your life. The warrior realized. Exactly. Dave chuckled and patted Carl on the back. Well, you'll be stuck here for a while. We've got plenty of custom orders and bulk item requests to catch up on what an alliance as large as ours would like to have in stock. But once we're fully stocked, I promise to help you keep doing interesting things at least once in a while. Chapter 1082. The show must go on. Opal gently pulled everyone back onto the area of the illusion that would be over the actual floor, and returned the space to its natural look. That revealed that the chairs were set on the step stages, but they were quickly reorganized so that groups could talk more smoothly. Illusionary maids brought snacks and drinks around, keeping everyone happy while they discussed the short viewing of the duel. Then, 20 minutes after the duel viewing ended, the stage shimmered, as Opal brought up a new illusion. For those interested, we will begin a viewing of the adventures of the first Kingdrad in 10 minutes. The stage announcer declared. This was one that she had done multiple times before because the story was one of the great epics from the last resurgence, and at this point it was basically a fairy tale, despite being based on verifiable historical events. Many of the guests migrated back to the main floor to chat and drink, while over half settled in for another show. If the Darklight host was going to do a full movie night for their meet and greet, nobody was going to argue. It was much more interesting than most of the welcoming parties they had been to, where you just stood around chatting with the same group of people that you'd seen at the same 50 events before. While that was also true of this one, as they were all Alliance members, they had seen a reenactment of a mythic rank duel and the mages had new gear to show off, so they had something new to discuss, even if they were around the same small group of people. The gear was as much a talking point as the duel itself was. The fight between the two powerhouses was almost too fantastical to believe, as if they were at the same rank, and not as if one were fighting with a 90% damage reduction handicap. So, discussing the powerful but clearly visible new outfits on the mages was much more interesting. Especially when the ladies were suddenly so fashionable. You know, this will be a cultural revolution for the Alliance. Now that the mages look so good, it's going to be difficult for the rest of us to keep up but it's the best drop mismatched fashion statement on our way to the dungeons. One of the rogues laughed. A warrior chuckled. Right? We all look like hobos, and now they're practically a uniformed force in totem rank robes. Maybe we should all start actually wearing our guild tabards, just to give us a bit of uniformity. The rogue chuckled. Fighting in a tabard was a pain. It always got in the way, flapping around when the more agile fighters were performing acrobatics in combat. Nothing was worse than flipping over an attack and having a loose bit of cloth flip in your face, blocking your view. In that way, Ray's fashion for the mythic rogues made perfect sense for them. There were loose or flapping ends on the sleeves, no loose sashes, as many used for fashion, and some slack in most of the tops, but they were all secured at top and bottom so nothing would move around when you were fighting. I just think that we might have larger issues if we start letting the mages dress like idols. They're already a bit strange. Who knows what they'll do if they are encouraged to cosplay in their daily life? One of the warriors joked. There was some quiet laughter, but not from the mages. They looked like they were seriously considering it. The rogue snorted in amusement. I am pretty sure that is a one-off sort of outfit. It wasn't among the options that the totem-ranked mages got. But I wouldn't be surprised if the tailor made more of them if the mages requested it. I don't think that most of them will, though. Can you imagine Genestra willingly wearing a short, frilly skirt in public? The others nearby laughed quietly at the thought. Genestra was currently wearing one of the most traditional mage robe-style outfits Ray had offered, and she was a notorious buzzkill. She didn't even approve of public displays of affection of any sort, or any sort of provocative outfit. She made the matrons of the Red Dragon orphanages seem relaxed and forgiving. In contrast, her younger sister, a royal-ranked mage apprentice with the guild, was notorious for the number of warriors who had been through her bedroom. Not just men, but always warriors. Carl went downstairs to join the guests who were more interested in new gear than the show, and was immediately swarmed with excited adventurers. It's first come, first served, right? I mean, among the totems. Obviously, the main raid team will get their gear first. One of the warriors asked.
Karl nodded.
For custom orders, to an extent. Some things are easier to make in batches, so when we get to an item on the list with numerous requests, multiple people who requested the same thing will all get it at once. For other orders, we will go through them as they were ordered, so the waiting time is somewhat reliable. That's a relief. At least that way, we won't have to wait ages for our equipment. Well, some of us, anyhow. I know that some of the flashier sorts are going to request that you make something extremely ornate. Does your guild even do that? The clothing so far has been very high quality, but the plate armor was really distinct, not engraved like most warriors request. He asked. We actually have a number of sculptors and artists on staff. They might not be high-ranking to finish all the items they work on, but there is no harm in letting them do the artistic portions, and then letting the master craftsman finish the enchanting.
Karl explained.
Oh, that is a good point. You can upgrade a non-magical statue or a partially completed armor piece if the material is right. Perfect. His relieved tone earned him a companionable pat on the shoulder from one of the warrior women. But can you do heavier armored versions of the rogue leather? I am an agility-type fighter, but I need more protection than that, and a brigandine isn't going to work for my fighting style.
Karl nodded.
Lady Ray can do some hardened leather, chitin or similar armor, or we can duplate over a leather or cloth base for mobility. Just put in the order for what you would prefer, and we will do our best to fill it. The masters know multiple styles as well. So, not just the knightly armor plates that are more common, but also the layered plate exposed brigandine and lamellar that is more traditional in Drod, or the other demonic fashions. You can also request specialty materials, but in most cases, you will have to provide the materials plus a crafting fee. Working with new materials also helped crafters expand their skills and unlock new abilities related to their trade. So, letting people give them exotic materials to work with was a win for everyone. It also saved Carl from having to take on random missions to find rare materials. Chapter 1083, Bulk Orders. The revelation that he would work with their materials if it was something that his people didn't have in stock was enough to get many of the Alliance members motivated to make new gear. Totem-ranked crafters often had multiple requirements before they would make a custom piece, but the Darklight host had agreed to very lenient terms with the Alliance, which would surely keep them busy for months. That was part of Carl's plan, though. Hawk and Thor needed to advance, if possible. Then someone would need to motivate Kara, if being behind her siblings wasn't enough. He thought that it should be. She was already the last sister to advance, so she should start working on a way to bring herself to totem rank soon. The warriors came forward with interest, and one of the stronger totems was pushed to the front as their spokesperson. Does that offer to make custom items extend to the blacksmith in your guild? We have many rare materials that have aspects we would like to imbue into an armor set. He asked.
Karl nodded.
I can't make guarantees that you will get everything you hope for out of an item combining multiple rare materials, but I can ask him to craft it with the desired outcome in mind if you make a list of bonuses and effects you would like to see. Do keep in mind that forging an entire suit of armor takes multiple days, and that's all he would be doing for those days, so if he's going to make 30 sets of armor for the warriors of the Alliance, it will be 3 months or more before he's finished with the totems. And that's without additional delays from specialty processes for rare materials. So you will have to be patient, and the simple bulk orders may be pushed ahead of the custom work to get more of the warrior's orders filled. He is also the one doing the metal weapons. The warriors grimaced as they heard that last bit of news. The Darklight Host smithy team was simply too small. Didn't he even have an apprentice? No, he likely did, but the apprentice would be filling lower-ranked requests, while only one master smith would be able to do what the totems needed. Are there any options that aren't as backed up for totem-ranked equipment? One of the warriors asked. At the totem rank? We're basically out of stock, so everything is being made to order. However, I can make you simple amulets, rings, and totems in short order, as they're quick to upgrade, and I can make a few every day. Carl offered. The warriors nodded. They could all use accessories, and they were fast to use. But they were not the most important parts of their gear. What is the armor you were wearing during the battle scenes before you transformed made of? It looked pretty cool. The warrior's spokesman asked. Carl smiled and shook his head. That is an armor skill. It's not a physical suit of armor. The warrior sighed. That's too bad. Though if it looks cooler than your actual armor, I guess it makes sense. It's actually an epic grade skill. It gives me epic grade armor level stats. So there is no need for me to have real armor. Though I do have a lot of fashionable clothing for when I'm not in armor. Can't you make better gear than epic grade, though? You could improve your stats with proper armor. One of the mages reminded him. They had seen the totem grade items that had been turned out today, so it wouldn't be outlandish to think that the creator would have a full set of items at that level. That is true. The real advantage is that if the armor spell gets trashed, I can just refresh it, and it will come back at full durability. Some days I can be very hard on my equipment. But I do have excellent accessories. That was true in a way. Superb for the day that he had created them. A bit outdated now. A lot of what drops in the mythic dungeon is metals and gems, but the totem rank dungeons that can be done weekly are heavier on the leathers and scrap weapons. Most of those get smelted for metal as well, but it just feels wrong for a warrior to go to battle in leather armor. One of the men explained.
Karl shrugged.
I know a few agility-focused warriors who fight in nearly nothing, but that's why we did the brigandine. It's not as metal-intensive as most armor, and the outer leather coat provides a lot of protection on its own. Alternately, we could do something with hard chitin, but our stocks of that are limited as well. One of the female rogues giggled, drawing attention to herself. Seashell bikini armor. See, now you're talking. But I suspect that it might be difficult to find anyone to battle test it. The warrior's spokesman joked. The rogue pulled a bundle wrapped in canvas out of her storage and placed it on the table by Carl. If you can make me a suit of armor out of that with a focus on negating fire and poison damage, I would appreciate it. Those are the major elements in the dungeons that I do, she explained.
Karl nodded.
I can do that. I would assume that most of you are going to need those same resistances with different bonuses. The warrior nodded. Those plus physical damage reduction for the warriors, especially the tanks. Carl made notes and then tapped the pencil on the notepad in thought. How many tanks do we have in the group? If you don't mind giving up offensive capability, I can fully stack up defensive bonuses for you. In a duel, that's not great. But in a group, that should be precisely what your teammates need. Plus, the healers will thank me. If you want a full defense set of gear, raise your hand, and bring me your supplies or tell me what sort of armor you want. Then I will sort the damage dealers by class. Chapter 1084. Imbalanced Class Assignments. 2 hours later, Carl had notes on all the fighting members of the Alliance at totem rank or higher, and a better grasp of just how lopsided the system's assignment of classes was. Even before the adventurers chose their specialties. There were only 6 tanks among the 64 totems who had been present for the party, and 14 healers. The other 44 members consisted of 30 warriors, 8 rogues, and a few of each other class. The imbalance was huge, even worse than it was at the academy with the young elites. According to the totems, it was even worse at the overlord rank, as many of the totems had been handpicked to fill roles on the teams. Those at lower ranks were mostly filler to the guilds here, and while they contributed heavily to the alliance, they filled vacancies with mass numbers and not targeted recruitment. Of the estimated 200 overlords in the Alliance, there were over 170 warrior and rogue class members, with a coven of druids who had come to study under Dave making up almost all their healers. Dave looked over Carl's shoulder as he stared at the notes he had made, and then patted him gently on the shoulder. We simply don't have the resources to pull mages to us. Any guild alliance can do the same runs we do, and the lack of competition was enough to bring in the totems for our teams, but the overlords prefer to study under guilds who have more mages at the top. The druid sighed. Well, perhaps I can do something to help that balance. I have a Dana mage with me, and she's got some impressive skills as a former Murim battle mage who advanced to a mystic blade master. I don't know if she will be interested in taking on more responsibilities, but we might be able to bring in a batch of weaker mages and bring them up through the ranks with a bit of time. Carl suggested. Dave considered that. An overlord-ranked mage might have the skills with an advanced class, but it would be a hard sell, when so many other guilds had mythic and totem-ranked mages in their top ranks who were actively recruiting. I think that you can save your mage the trouble unless you're going to do something extreme and take in the outcasts and failures from other guilds. I know some go that way, hoping for the diamond in the rough, but there is a good reason that they were kicked from their old guilds in the first place. Losers stay losers, and they'll just end up chewing through resources for zero results, as their potential is trash. Dave explained.
Karl nodded.
That's a problem everywhere. So few have an easy time advancing, and the resources to push them higher get increasingly expensive with ever higher side effects. There is a potion that I heard of used in the past, to push someone from commander up to overlord in a single shot. But then, they would be stuck at the start of overlord forever. But worse, 9 out of 10 times it failed, and they instead got stuck at some point in royal rank instead. Dave looked horrified. What level of desperation is that? I can see some of the demons doing it with their bloodline limitations, but that is insane.
Karl nodded.
People will do anything if they think that there is a chance that they can actually get out of a desperate situation. Those potions that Remy made have much smaller side effects, but I still wouldn't use them more than once unless the progress in between was smooth, and it was a time constraint that was causing the desperation. Dave frowned as he thought about that. What about crafters? If you can teach them crafting skills, you'll get many more mages and magic using classes. They tend to love knowledge the most. Is the Darklight host planning to take in new crafting team members?
Karl smiled.
Of course. Probably not at as high of a level as the immediate demands would like. But they'll get there. By the time that they make it to overlord rank, anyone who wanted to be a crafter likely already has a trade skill, and that makes it hard to train them, as they will be limited by the skill they have, while our techniques can be considered a specialty trade skill for the most part. Dave nodded. I will come by tomorrow with some potential members for the Darklight host. I think that I know just the members that you want, and while they're rejects from another guild, they might be a good fit for your guild of interesting characters. Then Dave left before Carl could ask just what sort of interesting characters he had in mind. It was already very late in the evening, and the last of the guests were headed out to their own homes, leaving the Darklight host members alone in the new house. Well, this place is nice, and Ray went and set up some extra furniture for us. But what are we even going to use this place for? A staging area for more difficult dungeons? Maybe a second store? Dana asked. The Alliance can buy straight from our other store using the system interface, so I don't think that we need a second store. But yes, a staging area for dungeons. Dave also thinks that he's found more crafters for our guild. So I will see what he brings in the morning, and we might make this a second crafting house. If we can pull a few skilled individuals, we can leave them mostly unsupervised. Or we can keep moving back and forth. Remy does most of her instruction remotely, but we should check in on the guild more often. I'm thinking that we should set up a permanent portal between the two houses, so members can just walk back and forth. Then, they can sell and shop wherever is better for them. Carl suggested. Chapter 1085. Dave's recommendation. Carl considered the options, then headed for the safe rooms in the lower basement. Those were intended to protect the weakest of guild members, but they would also be the best of the workshops and labs for the Darklight host. Carl looked at the small and dingy rooms of the first basement level and frowned. It was more like a dorm than anything, similar to the second level of the Drod Guild house, but even larger as it apparently extended the entire distance under the courtyard. There was enough space here for 100 people, and while it was brightly lit and well decorated, it still felt like a cramped budget motel. I think that we can make some updates here, but that can wait. The lowest basement level will be the most important, and that's where I want to put the portal. Carl informed Dana, who had followed him downstairs. The lowest level had a safe room, complete with thick metal door, and then a large open area with a few glass-walled lab rooms, already set up for just what they needed. The labs could be observed from outside, but had powerful barriers on them, and Carl could see that someone had set mana crystals into the walls by the doors as storage for the barriers. That was an excellent start, and it would allow the guild to work in safety on experimental projects. I think that we can place the portal array right here, Dana suggested, with a gesture toward what Carl would have called the reception area for people who had come down the stairs. What about at the back of the room so that we can put security at the door? I can give it a gargoyle or two, in case someone tries to mess with the building, Carl suggested. Oh, that's not a bad idea. Having them near the stairs, and then we can put a few more upstairs as well. But inside the building, so that the other Alliance members don't think that we're threatening them. Dana moved to stand where Carl was and looked around the room. Most of the labs were visible from that location, but not the entrance to the safe room, which was set around a corner. That would keep it out of the direct line of fire if the enemy came from the portal. All right, I think this spot works, though we could put it in one of the storage rooms so it could be locked down.
Karl chuckled.
I am going to put the other entrance in the illusionary city of the library. If they can get that far, it will be extremely impressive. In that case, there isn't much to worry about. Nobody will even know that it exists. Are you going to have Opal set an illusionary domain here as well? Carl shook his head.
No.
I'm going to set one with an illusion element stone. We can have the gargoyles set up in a manicured garden area with a hedge maze. The 3 exits will lead to the 3 ways out of the main room and back into reality. It will give the researchers and crafters a place to relax as well, without having to be far from their labs. I'm thinking that a second illusion to expand the crafting area would be good as well. There isn't a lot of room to have dozens of workers down here. Dana nodded, then yawned. You work on that. I'm going to bed. Carl laughed and swept her up in his arms. No, we're going to bed. I will take care of the space in the morning. It's not that big of a rush job. Lotus woke Carl sometime the next morning by poking him repeatedly in the face while pacing in place. What's up? You're awfully excited this morning, Carl asked while adjusting Dana in his arms. Dave says that we've got guests coming soon, Lotus explained. And that has you so excited? Lotus shook her head. Tessa is making chocolate chip raspberry pancakes for breakfast. That made more sense. Now that he was awake, Lotus ran out of the room, headed for the kitchen on the main floor, so Carl carried a drowsy Dana to the shower to get ready for the day. They were ready just in time as it happened. Dave was knocking at the door as Carl came down the stairs, chasing the smell of pancakes. Ah, good morning. Have you eaten? We have breakfast ready. Dave shook his head, and a small pair of fluffy ears poked past him, sniffing the air. Oh, you're evil, Carl laughed, as he realized that Dave had brought him a royal-ranked bunnykin girl, plus whoever else was outside the door. These are the rejected potential crafters I told you about. They couldn't raise the tax fees or their ranks fast enough to stay in the guilds that they applied to, and they've been doing odd jobs around the city. I hired them to come in. There should be plenty for everyone, and we can keep cooking once the chaos ends. Dave smirked, but the girl didn't realize the danger that she was in until a squealing green missile grabbed her and spun her in circles. You're here to join our guild? That is wonderful. What trade skill did you want? Do you have a class? What class? Oh, we're going to be such good friends. Lotus excited rambling, and the sudden manhandling caught the girl off guard, and she wasn't sure how to respond. But after a few seconds, Ophelia picked both of them up and physically separated Lotus from the applicant. We discussed this. What did we decide? She asked the errant cleric. Even if they're adorable, no manhandling without asking permission. Lotus sighed. Then she looked at the girl. Do I have permission? You're so fluffy and small. The girl looked terrified as she turned to Dave. Where did you bring us? The druid laughed. It's just one green dragon cleric. She will calm down in a minute. This is the Darklight host, the new crafting guild who has joined our Nara Group Guild Alliance. They are willing to take in young members without trade skills, train them and help them advance. They don't care that you don't bring any existing marketable crafting skills to the guild. They'll train you from the ground up. The bunny nodded. That was an incredibly rare thing in Xylaz, where everyone wanted instant gratification at the very highest levels of skill. Investing years into an apprentice whose loyalty and progress you couldn't guarantee was a lot to ask when space was this limited, and the head tax was so high. Chapter 1086. Lala's Cool Skill. Ophelia put the girl down, but kept Lotus in her arms as the cleric took out a rolled pancake and offered her a bite. Please do come in. We will meet everyone over breakfast. But first, do we have any idea what skill everyone hoped to gain? Carl asked. The cool one. They all replied in unison. Ophelia laughed as she munched on the pancake, then licked Lotus' fingers clean. It looks like you've got your work cut out for you then, Monster Man. You've got the cool skill. She joked. Better question. Who has a class or skill that can create solid objects permanently? Carl tried. Again, all their hands went up. Carl activated the nameplates in his system interface and tried not to laugh. Every single one was in a pale yellow color, and when Carl inspected them, they were listed as Phantom Path Rogue. What is the skill that creates something solid and permanent? Carl asked. The bunny held out her hands and two items appeared. A kitchen knife and a broom. Really? The girl nodded. It can be any sort of non-magical tool. I can even make daggers and short swords or bows. Well, that wasn't as terrible as Carl had feared. Plus, it should have remarkable synergy with the skills of a runemaster if the addition of the runes didn't cause problems with the created tools. But the fact that she had thought of household tools first told Carl that this group was not made up of people who should be sent into a dungeon. Dave led everyone inside, while Carl took count of the new applicants. There were 12 in total, all royal ranked. They all had the same class, which was odd, as it was an uncommon subclass, but more importantly, they were all small for their species and young. None were full-grown adults, and most were dragonkin boys, but there were 4 bunny girls that the others seemed protective of. Tessa had heard the chaos, and was already working on bringing out more breakfast for everyone. She kept food stored in her inventory, so most of it just needed heating for a short-notice meal, even when it was for a dozen starving students. All right, everyone, meet our new students. Everyone, introduce yourself.
Carl insisted.
And they all panicked. Dave chuckled. Welcome to part 1 of the Why They Have Issues in a Guild Setting show. Every single one of them has major social anxiety. Carl smiled at them. That's all right, I can actually see your names with the system interface. Though there are some issues. I don't know if some of these names are a joke of some sort, or if I don't get the pronunciation. There are 4 girls, all named variations of Lala, and 8 boys named variations of Ahmed. The bunny girl who had been brave enough to peek around Dave nodded happily. Lala is the name of our goddess, and Ahmed III is the current king of Sholaha. There are plenty of boys named after him because it's supposed to bring good fortune and strength. She explained. All right, we will find individual nicknames for everyone as we go. But first, get a good breakfast because I'm going to introduce you all to runecrafting and start your training while I renovate the work area.
Carl insisted.
Dave smiled as he took a seat at the table. You don't mind if I hang around for that, do you? I'm intrigued both by your confidence that they can learn a trade skill and by what you might do to your villa. He explained. Not at all. Normally, I would call it a guild secret. But as we're in an alliance, there's no harm in you knowing, as long as you know not to spread it too far. Carl agreed. Now I'm definitely not leaving. What could you possibly do that would shock me to the point that it would matter to other guilds? Dave asked. Carl stood up and reached out to tousle the hair of all 4 bunnies, then activated. Follow me, little one. Beast Master Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, runecrafting, will be transferred to the fluffy bunny Lala. Dave gave Carl a confused look as the bunnies leapt up and hugged him while crying but smiling. "What did you do?" he asked. "Taught them the basics of runecrafting and gave them the trade skill. These are my bunnies now," Carl replied, then stuck out his tongue at Lotus, who rolled her eyes at him. Of course, the Carl would steal all the bunnies. Then Carl moved on to the others and taught the dragonkin the runecrafting skill, preparing them all for their first lessons of the day. Dave sighed. "If I had known it was that easy to learn a crafting skill, I would have done it ages ago, just to have a little something on the side." Everyone in the room except Carl laughed at his mournful tone. "It really isn't that easy. I actually have a specific skill that lets me teach guild members a single skill that I know," Carl explained, then belatedly sent guild invitations to the dozen recruits. The shock on their faces doubled, as they were being invited as full members, and not just apprentices hanging around hoping for scraps. "Are you that confident that you can make them into valuable crafters for the guild, that you would take them as full members right away? It's considered a great shame for full members who are forced out," Dave asked.
Karl chuckled.
"I am confident in their skills growth, and if they're slacking, I can set a bodyguard on them to keep them training. Or I can just assign them to the task of keeping Lotus from getting bored. But their growth should be smooth enough as well. As long as they make it to Overlord in the next few years, they can do 90% of what the guild needs. And I know that we can make that possible with the appropriate application of alchemy and mana overloads." Dave chuckled. There were likely more than a few workers' rights laws abuses involved in his plan, but Carl was certainly confident it would work. Chapter 1087, Renovations. "I will ask 2 of my companions, Tion and Lotus, to stay here and watch the new arrivals for a moment after I get them started. Dave, I am headed to the second basement to do some renovations, and I think that you will want to see this part," Carl announced. Lotus cheered, while Tion laughed, having seen through Carl's thoughts. He could make all sorts of basic items, and while he wasn't a master at fancy decorations, they also weren't common-grade non-magical tools. So he could make the base items for the new arrivals. Carl took out a notepad and wrote down a string of runes for enhanced sharpness and physical damage. "Everyone, inspect these runes closely. You should be able to read them now with the skill that I have given you, and I want you to write them down on a blade of your choice. It doesn't matter if it is a dagger, a kitchen knife, or a sword. It really doesn't matter. These are just practice, so don't be too hard on yourself if they don't work out quite right the first time. If the ones you can make yourself don't work, Tion will help you get them right." The Beastkin and Dragonkin apprentices looked doubtful that the little ball of fluff being affectionately mauled by the green dragon cleric could actually help them. But when Tion flicked his tail, a dozen flat-sided daggers appeared on the table. "All right, start with his creations. I am going to prepare the workshop." Carl motioned for Dave to follow him downstairs into the second basement level where the labs were. "Oh, this one is more of a secure facility. Ours was set up as an open floor plan textile factory with dozens of tables where they had sewing machines set up," Dave noted. "That's not a terrible idea. We could give them individual work tables. But I have something more interesting in mind." Carl hummed to himself as he focused on the vision of the garden and began to inscribe an arcane element gem. It wasn't as good as an illusion gem for the purpose, but they were short on those, so he left them all to Opal, who could make the best use of them. The arcane gem was sort of a catch-all for any sort of spells, and while it didn't give any sort of boost to what was written on it, it also wouldn't interfere with the spells. He had picked a larger stone, as the illusionary domain was a complex ability, but it didn't have to be powerful to just give the appearance of an outdoor receiving area. Then, he took out a totem-ranked earthstone and inscribed it with the gargoyle spell. Dave watched in silence as Carl covered the 2 stones in runes, wondering what sort of defensive array the monster man was setting up for the workshops. Then, Carl activated the 2 spells together and placed the stones inside an earth magic-created plinth by the door to the stairs. Unless someone actually destroyed the plinth or the illusion, they would never find the core of the spell. But the area appeared to be massive, compared to what Dave knew it to be. "How does this work? Do we just run into the real rooms and then feel around for the doors?" he asked, admiring the garden, where a group of 12 small griffin-shaped gargoyles were playing. If you exit the garden from one of the 3 openings, you will find yourself in one of the hallways, in the actual room. Then you can move freely through the actual basement. You just need to pass through the garden to get to the real room. But I'm not quite done yet. There is one more addition to make this room perfect.
Karl explained.
Then, he went to the back of the garden, where a small open area was surrounded by curved benches. Karl created a replica of the system stones using earth manipulation, but covered in the runes 4 portal. The spell was directly linked to the illusionary domain in the library of the guild house, so as long as it remained active, you could just walk from one to the other. Emma, one of the alchemists working in the labs nearby, came out and waved at Karl. "Welcome back, Master Karl. Is Miss Remy coming back to train us for a while?" she asked. Remy came out to visit her students, now that someone had reminded her. "I will visit for a while. The portal is going to remain open to the new villa that we acquired, so we can move back and forth as we need. I have so much to teach you, and the Karl has new students again today, so he can do a skills class with the rune people," Remy explained. "Oh, more crafters? That's a good thing. They're working us to the bone here. No matter how fast we finish things for the market, they just get bought out instantly. We had to delist most of the stock for the common items from the guild store so that we actually had stock for the in-person customers," the alchemist explained. Karl smiled at her. "Sorry for the trouble. They were a bit short on craftsmen here, but we will get caught up soon enough. There are only 1,000 alliance members, plus some associates, so they'll all get the essentials soon." Dave, who had been standing silently to the side, stepped up and looked through the portal. "That should be an illusionary world as well, right? Where did you link the portal to, and how long do you plan to keep it open?"
Karl nodded.
"It's an illusionary domain at our guild house in Drod, and I was going to just make the portal self-sustaining so that anyone who stepped on the platform could open it at will. Give me a moment and I will make a matching set on the other side, so that the portal from here will have a security system." Dave looked confused, so Karl explained. "If either side is blocked or the activation sequence is locked, it will stop the portal from activating if they're linked. So, either side can just put the magical equivalent of a lock on the door if there is trouble. Then, we don't need to worry about intruders invading from the other house, while guild members can just move back and forth." Dave smiled in understanding. "Brilliant. And if intruders want to get in, they have to get past these gargoyles, who I suspect aren't as friendly to strangers." The little griffins seemed to take after Thor, and they were begging for head pats from the druid. "I think it's your nature affinity. The gargoyles are normally much less interested in strangers. It will be difficult to keep the green dragon cleric out of here, though. So, they won't get bored." Chapter 1088. New Workspace. While they talked, Karl was quietly using earth manipulation to add tables and benches to the labs outside the illusion, filling the workspaces so that the new group could split up to work on the projects that they needed. "That is magnificent. The level of versatility that your class and crafting skills give is beyond anything that I have come across before." Dave sighed as Karl let the portal close so that Remy could get to work with her students. "It really is. When I was young, I used to hear the phrase jack of all trades, master of none. Normally, it was used as a derogatory for someone who couldn't hold a job. But in a way, that is what my class is, except it's good at nearly everything." Karl agreed. Dave shrugged. "Every guild master has a little something that sets them apart. For you, it's got to be the fact that you have an answer for every situation. Most of us protect our guilds with pure brute force, but you pull them in by having something to offer everyone. It's brilliant, really. All the advantages of a larger guild, but with that small guild family feeling. When you've got 200 official members in a branch, plus apprentices, employees, and hang-arounds, it's impossible to know everyone on that level. So, the big guilds feel more like an employment contract, even though technically, they all are." Karl led Dave back up the stairs, followed by one of the gargoyles. He hadn't specifically limited them to the illusion, and the spell caused them to want to protect the property in general. Lotus watched the small creature fly around the main floor, inspecting its territory for the first time. "Did you make tiny flying gargoyles?" she asked, verifying what she was seeing. Cute, aren't they? They're set to guard the basement area, where I put a protective illusion, but they'll keep guard on the rest of the house as well. Carl agreed. The griffin had perched on the banister at the top of the stairs on the 3rd floor, where it could watch everything happening in the common areas of the house, and Lotus was giving Carl a suspicious look. You made them fly so that I can't catch them, didn't you? Carl put a hand over his heart. I made them feathered and furry with fluffy tails and shiny beaks, and still you're suspicious of my motives. Dave smirked as he watched their interactions. Carl really had mastered handling a nature cleric. His didn't even look like she was high all the time, and Dave hadn't even known it was possible to stop them from getting bored and stoned when they didn't have anything to do. Maybe that was the trick? Just plan far enough ahead, and you could keep them from getting sidetracked. For example, Lotus had already gotten past her dismay and was creeping up the stairs to go inspect the gargoyle, who was currently watching her with great interest. They were guardians of the house and the people who belonged in it. It really had no reason to run away from her. If she was right next to it, the golem could be sure that she was safe. What it did do was back away from the railing, so that the enthusiastic cleric didn't fall down the stairs. Dave tapped his chin and nodded in satisfaction at some internal thought. Since I'm here now, I don't suppose that I could get bumped to the front of the line for a new set of gear? I've had terrible luck with armor, and while I've got a number of excellent accessories for my class, the armor sets that you made for the others would be a definite upgrade for me. He asked suggestively. Oh, so there was an ulterior motive, beyond bringing me the new apprentices. But fear not, you were actually at the top of the list for new gear anyhow, as Ray was already working on a design that a druid would like before she got sidetracked making cute things for the other myths. Ray nodded in agreement. It's a good suit. I know that you're a bear tank like our berserker, but the armor was intended to look good for casual wear. I have it finished already. We just need Carl to do some upgrades and then hit it with a spell stone to make it really shine. Carl wondered what the druid might actually need. He had limited invulnerability and crushing blows already, and Carl had taught him bestial regeneration. Those were the core skills of any tank. So, Carl decided to go with something that would give him a bit more enjoyment out of battle. Gravity Slam. When he was finished, the armor was completely enhanced for damage reduction, avoidance, strength, agility, and regeneration speed increase. The only part of the set of armor that wasn't purely defensive was the spell on it. That way, it would do the most it could to boost the druid's tanking ability, while leaving him the versatility to use accessories to decide if he needed to take less damage or do more of it. Item created, Totem Rank, Totem Grade. Protector's Armor of Dominance adds 1050 points to damage reduction, 20% bonus to agility, increases strength by 5% per rank of the wearer. Additional effects, Self-Repair Level 2, Gravity Slam. Dave stared at the armor with an awestruck look on his face, and even Ray hummed in appreciation. You should call your wife over so she can see this before you equip it. I'm sure it will set her mind at ease knowing that you're so well protected. Ray suggested. Dave snorted in amusement. And have her show up with all our kids? I'd never get her back out again. I swear I love that woman to bits, but she drives me insane some days. Ray shrugged. Letting a family of humanoid badger children meet Kara seemed like a fun idea. At the very least, she could wear them out for the evening so the mother badger could sleep. Chapter 1089. Backlog of Requests. Dave shook Carl's hand and then equipped the armor before he set out payment on the work table. Then, he headed out to go show his family his new equipment. He would look for more pieces later, but for now he had something to show off to his wife. That left Carl and the new apprentices without supervision for the first time, and he could really start training them. More than the simple examples that he had them working on while he did the illusions in the basement. Will we be able to do things like that one day? Lala asked.
Carl smiled.
If you can't, I would be disappointed. But I don't expect that to be anytime soon. You've got learning to do, and some of those abilities won't be available until you're an overlord or totem. So, you've got some time and we can start getting you on the basics that the Guild Alliance has been requesting. I know that it's a bit of a rapid transition, but we've got 1,000 people clamoring for new items. The faster we can get through the first rush of requests, the better. The bunny nodded. That makes sense. Like when you do a deep clean of a house. You don't start with the corners and closets, which need the most work. You start with the common areas and bedrooms so that they notice your work faster. Then you do the hard parts when they're in a good mood so they can see you working hard at the difficult parts.
Karl chuckelt.
If you did the hard parts first, they would think you were lazy or incompetent. But if you did the easy parts first, they would have something to compare it to. All right, since you're royal rank, we will have you make items for the warriors at the overlord rank. They're the most requested items, and I've already messaged the Drod Guild House to let them know that I will be having you make the simple items, so they can focus on the more ornate ones. You're at the same power level for the most part. Some of them are still commanders and most are royals just like your group. But they're mostly sculptors who were trained in runecrafting. Karl created a chalkboard and drew a picture of a bracelet. Then the runes for skill damage and strength increased to the largest possible degree. That was what would make the warriors happiest, and they could wear one on each arm. That meant they were going to need a huge number of them, but they didn't have to be particularly decorative. Then Karl drew a second bracelet and the runes for self-repair and external focus. That would approximate the mending spell that the clerics could use to fix gear. The second one is for you to keep for yourselves. It is used to patch damaged items and gear. Not as good as a professional, but it will keep them together well enough. You don't need it today, but you will soon. Once you have one, you're on the warrior bracelets. Royal rank equipment is low for overlords, but with this set of runes for skill damage and stacking strength, it should come out as an epic item, and that will make the bonus enough that they will take it anyhow. He explained. Then, Tion created a whole pile of silver bracelets in the middle of the table for everyone to pick from. In theory, Karl could let them do the writing, and then upgrade the items himself as the metal was capable of holding totem-ranked enchantments. But that was a higher price point than what the overlords could easily afford. What are these directions? One of the dragonkin asked. The stroke order. Instead of having someone show you directly, the number and arrow tell you the order. He smiled as he understood, then began to carve the metal to begin his first attempt. Then, Karl turned to Ophelia, who had her arms around Lotus to keep her from interfering with their work. Why don't we have Remy help everyone past the bottleneck today? Then we can find out about the Overlord rank dungeons and let you all get some battle experience a rank ahead. He suggested. Naksha frowned. She was still too close to the start of Overlord for this to be likely to work for her, but she wanted the potion anyhow, just in case she could be a totem already. Remy came out with a whole tray of potions that had everyone's names on them, as well as a pair of activated healing totems. Just in case. Dana stared suspiciously at the tray. She had not forgotten how this went for her, but she couldn't be sure that this wasn't the same potion, as she had been half awake and hadn't really examined it. I'm sure that this version is fixed. Definitely more gentle than version Dana. No worse than a mana flush from the shrine at the guild house. Remy promised. The major difference was that a mana flush was voluntary, and you could stop it if it got too intense. But the potion came with the advantage that it would help train your body in more powerful mana, instead of having to understand it in advance, as was needed to break through with a mana flush. Ophelia patted the little cleric. I say we have Lotus go first in case something goes wrong with the rest of us. She's the only one who can resurrect, but we've got more healers ready for her. Tion stood up and fluffed his tail, making the workers laugh. But Lotus had faith in him. The little fox had incredible healing skills. All right, let's get this going. Lotus decided, then grabbed her own potion off the tray and downed it in one long gulp. Good volume, questionable flavor. Tastes too much like herbal medicine. Lotus noted with a bitter look on her face. Remy shrugged. There was nothing she could do about that. Added ingredients would alter the potion's effects. Then Lotus surged with gentle power and began to glow green and gold. That was new. Chapter 1090. Overlord Lotus. Lotus glowed more brightly by the second, and her power began to grow rapidly before pausing at the bottleneck to Overlord. Then it pushed right past and the glowing effect began to fade. The work had stopped completely, and everyone was staring at the cleric. Nobody had warned them that the Darklight host could do crazy things like that. If they had known it was an option, they would have asked to be alchemists and learned how to make that potion for themselves. Lotus sat down on the floor, staring at nothing, but with a huge smile on her face as she recovered from the effect. Tessa cleared her throat, and Lotus gave her a thumbs up, but didn't say anything. I think she's just overwhelmed. I will go next, Naksha declared, and grabbed the potion with her name on it. She began to leak a dark black mist as the potion took effect, and her power soared, but it was clear that it was going to end far short of the totem-ranked bottleneck. It just didn't have the aura of totem-ranked energy that would be necessary for the breakthrough. Remy frowned. I think that the ingredients simply aren't powerful enough to go from overlord to totem this way. Maybe if you were right at the bottleneck. But I might need better ingredients. Naksha shook out the tingling feeling from her arms, then cast a cleansing effect on herself after the effects of the potion ended. That's fine. I can feel the increase in my mana pool and spell power. When I transform to dragon form again, I suspect that I will be more powerful than I was before. That reminded Carl, he had a guild item to equip. Eternity's Blessing Artifact Grade. Mythic Rank. Equips in Guild Inventory. Activates the Guild skill Eternity, granting guild members the physical stats expected to be present at the peak of their life, at their current rank. He had gotten it as part of the settlement of the duel, but he had completely forgotten about equipping it in the guild inventory. He pulled up the interface and placed the item, then frowned at the system notice. Authorization lacking. Guild skill active for members of the Drod branch only. Well, that ruined his plan to surprise Supreme Lady Matilda, but it was good enough for his people. Not that they actually had any old and decrepit members or small children. The new assistants were young, but not young enough that it would be a huge change in their stats. Ophelia and Tessa took their potions, and Tessa began to glow red, while the Berserker just gave off an aura of powerful oppression. So, the glowing effect wasn't a new feature, it was a side effect of using it on dragon priestesses. One of the Lala bunnies pulled at Carl's sleeve as the girls recovered from the potion. Sir, is it possible that we will be able to buy that later? She whispered.
Carl nodded.
Remy just needs to grow a new batch of ingredients. She only had enough for these few potions. But once she has the materials, you will be with the other crafters in line to get your ranks advanced before we offer it to anyone else. Well, if someone found out about it and brought Remy the ingredients, she would make them one, then keep the rest of the batch for the guild. But that was unlikely. Many of these plants were effectively extinct, as rare as they were in the real world. The new apprentices cheered, even though they knew that if they went in order, they were like 20th in line. That was still relatively soon. It was also motivation for the commanders to work on their own growth in advance so that they could be royals before the potion was ready. That way, they could be monarchs right away, make really good stuff, and get some respect for their work. They got right back to work, turning out bracelets to prove that they had the skills to be worth the guild using a rare and powerful potion on. Because if they had to buy a totem-ranked advancement potion at retail prices, they would be old by the time they could afford it. Should we call someone over to find out about the dungeon options? Ophelia asked as the potion effect ended. Tessa gave her an incredulous look. They had literally just finished reaching Overlord, and already the Berserker was thinking of ways to go find a fight. That was devoted to battle even for her. Did the advancement or the potion trigger some level of her Berserker rage? Really, Ophelia was just eager to test out her skills, but there was no space in the house for her to transform.
Dana smiled.
I will contact Hugo. He said that there are options for Overlord-ranked dungeons, and he can explain them to us. I would ask Dave, but I think that he will be busy for a while now that he's finally returned to his own house. In her space, Kara laughed. Dave had been hiding from a whole house full of badger chaos for too long. He would definitely be busy for the day. Dana paused as she sent the message. Hugo will be over in a few minutes with members of his Overlord-ranked team. They are apparently short on healers, so they want to make a proposal for us to go with a larger team. The dungeons that allow larger teams give better rewards, so they would like to invite us to do a few of those with the Alliance before we go to do the individual runs on our own. Though, I suspect that the clerics will get at least daily requests to join dungeons now that the Alliance is about to find out that they're all overlords. Naksha snorted in amusement. Tessa and Lotus surely would. But most people weren't nearly as comfortable hanging out with a black dragon as the Darklight host was. Nobody here seemed to even notice the black dragon's death aura that she naturally gave off.